My fiancé canceled our wedding for the fourth time. He thought I'd wait forever. I looked her in the eyes, told her, "Take forever," and walked out, leaving her with the truth she never expected. Welcome to Amelia's Stories. If you're new here, sit back, because what you're about to hear is a real story about love pushed to the edge, trust stretched thin, and the kind of betrayal that forces a person to choose themselves. Drop your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories that hit hard. I'm Caleb Harding, 33, an electrician from Oregon. For the last 3 years I've been engaged to Savannah Cole, a 31-year-old physical therapist who always seemed to have one more reason to postpone our wedding. The first time I believed her, family trouble. The second time I made excuses for her, stress from work. The third time I told myself love requires patience. But this fourth time, something in my gut shifted. Each cancellation came with embarrassment I could feel burning across my face. Calling venues, informing guests, refunding deposits, pretending everything was fine. People stopped asking when the wedding was. They started asking if it was ever going to happen. And through it all, Savannah stayed distant, her explanations never truly lining up. Then 2 weeks before our newest date she sat me down again. No tears. No hesitation. Just a cold, familiar line. "I'm not ready. We need to postpone." That was the moment everything inside me changed. Planning one wedding is stressful. Planning 4 feels like slowly bleeding from the same wound. After Savannah postponed the date yet again, I found myself staring at spreadsheets, invoices, and vendor emails that felt more like reminders of my own stupidity. Every cancellation meant more money lost, more awkward conversations, more explaining to people who had already changed their plans too many times for us. The emotional weight of it all sat on my shoulders heavier than any tool bag I carried for work. But Savannah didn't seem to feel any of it. She grew distant, close enough to keep the title of fiancé, far enough that I felt like a guest in my own relationship. Fights started over nothing. She flinched away from simple affection and brushed off my attempts to connect. Nights she used to spend curled up next to me became nights she claimed she was working late, her explanations vague and practiced. I started noticing things that didn't add up. Receipts missing from her purse. Clothes she swore were old but still had tags. Weekend seminars for physical therapy that her job schedule didn't list anywhere. The more the inconsistencies piled up, the more I questioned myself. Whenever I brought up my concerns, hoping for honesty or reassurance, Savannah shut me down instantly. "You're too clingy," she'd snap. "You take everything so seriously." Each dismissal left me wondering if I'd been the only one trying to hold us together. If I'd been building a life with someone who never intended to show up for it. I finally reached a point where keeping everything bottled up felt heavier than admitting something was wrong. So I went to the one person who has never sugarcoated anything for me, my older sister Meredith. I expected her to tell me I was overthinking, that stress was making me paranoid. Instead she hesitated, took a breath, and told me something I didn't want to hear. She'd seen Savannah around town, more than once, with a man driving a Navy truck. Not in a group. Not in a casual passing way. Together. My first instinct was denial. Savannah wouldn't do that. She couldn't. But once the idea entered my mind, everything I'd been ignoring or explaining away suddenly felt sharper. Savannah started guarding her phone like it held state secrets. She'd flip the screen down whenever I walked into the room or take calls outside, whispering in a tone she never used with me. Then there were the scents, subtle but impossible to miss. A trace of cologne that didn't belong to me clinging to her clothes. She claimed it was from a patient or a coworker, but the story always shifted slightly depending on the day. And the new clothes, outfits I'd never seen before, ones she insisted she'd had forever, even though the creases were fresh and the style wasn't hers. Piece by piece the picture formed itself. Those wedding postponements, the emotional distance, the excuses, they weren't about stress or timing. They were hiding something far more deliberate. Something she never planned for me to discover. The doubts, the excuses, the late nights, they all built up until one Friday evening when everything finally snapped into place. I walked into the bedroom and found Savannah crouched beside the bed, zipping up a small overnight bag. Not a work tote, not a gym bag. A weekend bag. The kind you pack when you're going somewhere you don't want questioned. She looked up like a kid caught sneaking out. "It's for the training downtown," she said too quickly, her eyes already shifting away from mine. I kept my voice steady. "What training needs an overnight bag?" Instead of answering, she launched straight into defensiveness, sharp and rehearsed. She accused me of checking up on her, of policing her life, of suffocating her with my concern. It wasn't just the words, it was her tone. Cold, detached. Like I was the reason she needed to run. Something inside me went still. After she stormed out of the room to finish packing, I stepped onto the porch and made the call I'd been avoiding. I reached out to one of her coworkers, someone who had always been friendly. I asked one simple question. Does Savannah have a weekend training? There was a pause, then a confused, no. We don't have any scheduled until next month. That was it. One sentence, and the fragile story Savannah had been spinning for months collapsed. The bag, the late nights, the defensiveness, it all had an answer now. And it wasn't one she ever planned for me to know. It was a quiet evening, the kind that usually carried a sense of anticipation. I had rehearsed what I'd say, hoping this time it would be different. Instead, Savannah dropped the bomb like it was nothing. Sitting across from me at the kitchen table, she said with a calm, almost rehearsed tone, I think we should postpone the wedding again. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. Again? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm building inside me. I just don't feel ready, she continued, shrugging as if this were a minor inconvenience. And honestly, you're making me feel trapped. Her words hit like ice. She framed it so naturally. Me as the overbearing, controlling fiancé, her as the poor, suffocating victim. I stayed silent for a moment, letting her accusations settle. Then I asked quietly, almost too calmly, who is he? Her face tightened and she immediately denied everything. No one, she said, her tone sharp, defensive. But she didn't suggest a new date. She didn't offer a plan. Instead, she repeated the same vague excuse, I need space. That's when clarity hit me, cold and undeniable. I realized I had been living in denial, convincing myself that her pattern of cancellations and distance was just stress, just timing. But now it was unmistakable. Her excuses weren't about readiness or stress. They were about someone else. And for the first time, I allowed myself to fully see the truth. The person I thought I knew, the future I thought was ours, was never really mine to hold. The words hung in the air longer than any silence I had endured before. Savannah leaned back, crossing her arms, and said almost casually, we can reschedule, eventually. I looked at her, steady, and let the truth slip out quietly but with finality, take forever. For the first time in months, or maybe years, I felt the weight lift slightly, replaced by a strange clarity. I began gathering my things, methodically packing the life I had built around her into boxes, into bags, into something I could carry forward without the burden of lies and half-truths. Each item I touched felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had been too distracted to notice. Savannah froze, staring at me with wide eyes that weren't filled with remorse. They were filled with fear. Fear of losing my stability, my income, the quiet reliability I had provided for her over the years. The same qualities she had once praised suddenly became the anchor she realized she couldn't cling to anymore. She tried. Half-hearted apologies, guilt-tripped reasoning, attempts to charm or manipulate me back into her orbit. I listened, measured, unshaken. For the first time, I made a choice that wasn't about love or hope or compromise. It was about me. About the life I deserved. About boundaries I should have set long ago. And as I walked out the door, leaving her staring after me, I felt a strange, liberating weightlessness. I wasn't running away. I was finally moving forward and for the first time truly choosing myself. I didn't expect the truth to arrive so directly. One morning at the job site, a man in a Navy truck pulled up, asking for me by name. His presence alone made me tense, but when he introduced himself as Drew Mallory, a contractor I'd met once for a project, my unease turned into cautious curiosity. He didn't waste time. Drew's voice was awkward, hesitant, but the confession came out in a rush. Savannah had been lying to him too, telling him she was practically single, painting me as controlling and emotionally abusive. He admitted he didn't know what to believe until the last few weeks, when inconsistencies and secrecy began stacking up. At first I just listened, numb. Every late night, every cancellation, every fight suddenly aligned like tiles snapping into place. Savannah's stress wasn't stress at all. It was a cover for months of deceit. Then came the call that solidified everything. Lena Mallory, Drew's wife, reached out to me, confirming what Drew had hinted at. Savannah and Drew had been seeing each other for months, all while pretending our relationship was intact. Lena didn't gloat or blame, she simply laid out the timeline and the truth, leaving me with clarity I hadn't had before. It was devastating, but it also freed me from the fog of doubt I'd carried for so long. Finally, the pieces fit. Every excuse, every disappearance, every emotional withdrawal, it all made sense. Savannah's facade had crumbled and I could see her for who she really was. I didn't need a showdown. I didn't need yelling or tears or dramatic confrontations. What I needed was distance, clarity, and control over my own life. Quietly, I packed the remainder of my belongings, carefully avoiding unnecessary drama, and started returning the wedding items to the vendors. Dresses, decorations, catering deposits. Everything that had symbolized our engagement now returned to where it belonged. Savannah watched, incredulous, realizing too late that my silence carried more weight than any argument could. The financial blow hit her immediately. Fourth canceled wedding. Deposits gone. Vendors demanding refunds, contracts unraveling, and my refusal to cover anything this time left her scrambling. Even her family, exhausted from the cycle of postponements and excuses, withdrew their support, leaving her to face the consequences alone. Then I did one last thing. I printed out the messages between Savannah and Drew, the proof she had tried to hide, and handed them to her. No yelling, no confrontation, no begging for explanation. Just one simple line: "This is why you weren't ready." Her face shifted through disbelief, anger, and fear, but I didn't engage. I didn't plead or justify. I walked away quietly, leaving the room and her world intact except for the emptiness my absence created. 4 months, Savannah had relied on chaos and attention to manipulate outcomes. My choice to leave without confrontation, without seeking revenge through drama, became the ultimate punishment. Silence spoke louder than any argument ever could, and in that silence she faced the reality of her own choices. Savannah didn't take my departure quietly. Almost immediately, her attempts to regain control became frantic. My phone buzzed constantly with calls she left unanswered by voicemail, each one more desperate than the last. She appeared unannounced at my sister Meredith's house, pleading for explanations, for forgiveness, for any hint that we could salvage what she had sabotaged. Every attempt she made to reel me back in only highlighted how hollow her previous assurances had been. Meanwhile, her carefully hidden world began unraveling on its own. Drew, the man she had been seeing, was exposed when his wife, Lena, filed for separation. Lena made it clear to Drew's employer that he had been carrying on an affair, leaving him accountable and publicly shamed. Drew cut ties, leaving Savannah to face the consequences alone. Rumors of Savannah's erratic behavior started to ripple through her workplace. Colleagues who had once been friendly now viewed her with suspicion, aware of the repeated wedding cancellations and the whispered scandals. Her credibility, both personally and professionally, started to crumble. Through it all, I remained removed, silent, and independent. I didn't argue, I didn't return calls, and I didn't participate in her spiral. My calm detachment, the quiet rebuilding of my own life, and the financial independence I reclaimed became the most potent form of revenge. She had once thrived on chaos, on attention, on manipulating others to validate her choices. Now, denied that validation, she was left to face the fallout of her actions alone. My absence, my refusal to give her drama or reaction, was the consequence she had never anticipated. Months after walking away, I finally felt like I was breathing again. The apartment I moved into was small but mine. Every corner, every wall a space reclaimed from the chaos Savannah had left behind. For the first time in years, I set my own schedule, chose how to spend my evenings, and allowed myself the freedom to rediscover what made me happy. Work became not a source of stress, but a focus, a way to prove to myself that my life didn't hinge on someone else's approval or deceit. I returned to passions I had neglected: woodworking projects that demanded patience and precision, hikes that cleared my mind, and afternoons with my nieces that reminded me how much love could be simple, uncomplicated, and genuine. Slowly, each day stitched together a life I wanted to live, rather than one I had been forced to endure. Then came the letter. Savannah had reached out one last time, claiming she had made a mistake, hoping to pull me back into a cycle I had escaped. I read it once, felt a pang of the old hurt, and then folded it neatly into the trash. There was nothing left to salvage. I realized that leaving when I did hadn't been an act of defeat. It was a preservation of myself. I didn't need revenge through destruction or confrontation. My peace, my stability, and my freedom were the ultimate answers to her lies. Savannah faced the consequences of her choices alone, while I stepped fully into a life I finally controlled.